people selected other. Okay, so with that, we have a few minutes for those of you that, all of you responded to these, but those of you that have thoughts about some of the questions that we asked and want to help further explain your decision making. But one question that I'll pose is that if you knew about a clinical trial for Alport syndrome, you talked about what factors would be important, but what information would you want to know? What would you view as the most important information to inform your decision making? And then related to that, once you actually have that information, what things would be okay for you to accept, or what things might be deal breakers for you to enroll in a study. And it can be across any of the different topics that we've talked about, all that long list of factors we just worked through, biopsies, of course, being something we're particularly interested in your thoughts on. So we'll take, if anyone has thoughts on this, we have time for a few comments. Yes?
So I was actually in the Athena study, and I had a very good experience of it. It was very challenging for me because my veins are cracked. So it was hard to get the IVs, to say the least. But we managed it, and I managed my anxiety. I had a very positive association with having done what I did. I have not joined the Cardinal study because I'm concerned about whether or not it would be negatively impactful on my kidneys, and knowing that I'm not guaranteed to reach end-stage renal disease, I don't want to risk harming myself for research. And I think the vagueness of my progression and my prognosis plays heavily on my willingness to participate. And every lab test, I feel like I'm one step away from changing my mind. And I would definitely not enroll in something with biopsies. I had a very, very traumatic biopsy that resulted in 2 years of waking nightmares, and I would not do that again.
And do you mind sharing what was traumatic about it?
Well, first they lost me in the hospital for several hours, and then when they found me, they lost my lab work, so they didn't know my numbers. And then the nurse, I was told my husband was going to be allowed, well, he was my fiance at the time, be allowed in the room with me, and he was not. I was victimized as a child, and it put me in that vulnerable, exposed place emotionally. And then the nurse said she was so proud of me because she gave me the lowest possible dose of the numbing, and I felt literally everything that was going on. So that low dose of numbing was totally ineffective. It was extremely painful. And just having gone through the reaction emotionally of feeling victimized by feeling that pain and not being able to move and going back to that dark place in my life was just not worth it. And waking up for the next 2 years in hysterics and panic and feeling like I'm being re-victimized was just I'm not gonna do that again.
Sure. Thank you for both sharing that, as well as some really insightful thoughts about, for you and your relative progression, how that factors into your thinking about new interventional studies. So thank you very much. Other thoughts on what information is important to you, what factors are important to you?
I just like to speak. I have 2 boys who are 22 and 23 years old, and are involved in, are enrolled in college, internships. So I think, some of the challenging things are just the logistics, if they are actually eligible, how many appointments, where's the location, can they actually meet the commitments of the trial? So I think those are some of the really important things and things to take into account when designing a trial. is how can it be as convenient as possible for the patients to make that commitment to participate.
And have you and they maybe had a conversation about what might be the level of commitment that they would ever possibly take on in considering enrolling?
Yeah, I mean, if there perhaps was a site right near where they go to school, that would certainly facilitate. It's very difficult just to get them to come back to town, and they're only 2 hours away, just to come back and see their nephrologist for, every 6-month checkup and just, find the time to get their lab work done.
Sure. Well, that's helpful. Yes?
Okay. Hi, this is Amy. And I have autosomal dominant, so one of the, just a couple of people in the poll earlier with that. And for me, when I participated in the Athena study, I was able to do my genetic testing that way, and then that was a confirmed diagnosis. So that was super valuable, right? And also just what I am curious about in the trials was my disease progression, right? So for me, it was just great to have all that data versus, going to the doctor maybe every 6 months and you're not really sure. So it was like more frequent, and I was able to really understand. And my progression, I think, is atypical. So I went from like a GFR of 50 a year and a half ago, and now I'm at 15. So that's a pretty steep drop. And so I also been in the Cardinal study. And for me, I wanted to be in that because I was like, my GFR is headed on this downward slope. Maybe this is going to be the amazing thing. It's going to stop it. And that hasn't been the case for me, but there's also this sense of I'm hoping that these things will help my daughters. So having like a rare disease, the first one in my family with it, and an atypical progression, I'm just really hoping to gather a bunch of data and to chart a path for my girls so that they can prepare and they understand what might be coming for them too.
Yeah. So that's, I think, really interesting take. There's a number of things that you see as potential values to you, the genetic testing being included, the kind of increased frequency of monitoring and having that extra data, for yourself, obviously the possibility of treatment benefit, it sounded like, and then contributing to the science, to help advance for others, for your daughters. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, Janine.
A bandstand for the older population. If we already know that females progress many times much more slowly, is it not something to consider opening up the older end of criteria for trials?
You're saying the restriction on older population enrolling.
Yeah, the cutoff was 60, and I was already 62.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Yes.
My son Grant and I are both participating in the bardoxolone methylbicardinal trial, and I would say that as a parent, my hugest concern, all of a sudden you go to sign the paperwork, and the paperwork is scary. It says all these possible things that can happen to you, and so I almost backed out as a parent. But I would say participating in the Alport syndrome community was of such benefit. I'm so grateful because I picked up the phone, called Sharon of the Alport Syndrome Foundation. She's willing to hear my fears. And I asked her, do you know anybody that I can talk to that's in the trial? Just to hear somebody's voice that says, I'm on it, everything's okay. I was able to do that, connected with Phil Seymour. I'll be forever grateful for that nighttime phone call because he had been on the trial for 7 months and his GFR had already raised, we had no side effects. And being able to talk to somebody else, being within a community first as a parent to say, it's okay to put this in my son's body, that was huge. So I really encourage that sort of being able to talk to somebody first. I would also say that a huge concern of mine was, well, is this doctor in the clinical trial going to be more concerned about the clinical trial than my kid? That was a huge fear, because it's not my doctor, it's not our doctor that we know. That's not been my experience at all. He's put us as patients first beyond anything, and so I'm very grateful for that. Our experience has been very positive. And I would say part of that decision-making is really when you get to that point where the medications you can't tolerate anymore, and your quality of life is really compromised, and you're in between a rock and a hard place. That's when the clinical trial comes in, and for us, that's been a really positive experience.
Sure.
So
can you help me maybe understand what about, I think you're probably alluding to the informed consent document and the explanation of all of the potential either known or maybe unknown risks, safety concerns. Were there particular types, is it a particular severity of potential events that could happen? What was it that was scary about that list of possible
Well, the list
downsides?
includes, of course, to cover your bases legally, which I totally understand. It includes, that your disease could progress more quickly, there could be damage, we don't know about long-term damage, they say death, right? And they have to, I get that.
So some of the more serious side
Even though I
effects.
understood it, and we'd already had several meetings, and I understood the science, and our own doctor said, I really think you should try to get into this trial, that Grant should try to get into the trial, because he's at the end of his medications and his quality of life is very challenged at this point. It's worth it. The science does seem solid. And we had brought this information to her, just as we spoke about. It was a patient bringing the information to our doctor who wasn't aware of it. But that's very scary. But to, again, just get a human being on the phone to say, look, no, I'm taking it. I feel good. I already have more positive results. No side effects.
Sure.
As a parent, that's really important to be able to hear when you're signing that document that says you could be harming your child.
Right.
So I would think that's really important to be participating in the community and have a way for parents, when you're asking pediatrics to get involved, to have a support system for the parent, I believe is really critical. If trials could be started first with adults, and you have a chance to talk to somebody, that's really huge. Or talk to a participating doctor first. If I could have spoken to Dr. El-Shahawi first, so I knew that's where we were applying, was in LA, to have the opportunity to speak with him first and say, how are the patients doing? Have a conversation first.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe that would encourage other parents.
Thank you for walking me through all of your process and your thoughts about what might be helpful. Very, very helpful.
So I'm using myself as the foot in the door as a patient, but I think one of the concerns, I'm also a board member of the ASF, and I'll use my sister maybe as an example. She also has Alport syndrome. It's X-linked in her family, and she has 3 kids, and my nephew has already started to show the hematuria and hearing aids, so a good chance that he is going to have the same kind of condition that I have. However, my sister's not here. This is a Friday, a work day. She has a full-time job. She has to take care of family. And it's not a type of condition where my nephew's going to die tomorrow. We're talking 10, 15 years in the future of using myself as a case example. How do we try to instill a sense of urgency that someone who doesn't have the means and the luxury to participate in the clinical trial, how do we engage people like that and reach out to them? And it's a struggle. If I put myself in her shoes, I mean, I know she would love to be here today, love to be giving the answers of why it's a challenge, but it's almost like the group here that's participating and has this chance to participate in this EL-PFDD, we're the lucky ones. We're the ones who have or have made it the priority to have the economic means to be here. But the people that we're trying to reach out here to understand this, for all the reasons that Jim Simon has gone over, how do we make their opinions and their voice heard? So I just want to sort of leave that comment into the discussion.
Well, I might even put it back and ask Andre if you have thoughts. You're involved in the community and you have personal experience with the disease. So what, if you have thoughts on that, would be love to be able to put those into the record for today to pass that on.
So It's a balancing act that I am doing with my sister because I have to realize that she's a busy person and she lives in a rural community. What would it take to establish something that would be doable for her and her family to be able to participate? And I think that is sort of what with the ASF and other organizations that we're trying to work with, how do we reach out to fill that gap? And I know that the industry, the folks who are working on the clinical studies, they're looking at that, trying to get that information, clinical coordinators, trying to answer that question. But there's still a lot of things to overcome. And, again, as Jim had pointed out, there's a lot of fatalism. There's a lot of not a sense of immediacy to it. And when you have those things in combination with your day-to-day, when you wake up in the morning, because of the heterogeneity of the condition, there are a lot of us who, when I wake up in the morning, I don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm an Alport patient. It's not the first thing that comes in my mind. I don't know any different from that. So even if I were to put myself in my 15-year-old shoes, even then, the case when I knew my kidney function was declining, that was not the first thing in my head.
Sure.
In that case, again, as Dr. Simon had gone over, my mom probably would have been trying to find that clinical, but it wasn't what I was most interested in at that point.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, any final thoughts? It's the last thing between us and lunch, so, but want to get any other comments if you have it.